wouldn't mind sharing with us some of what happened, because I think people think, again, it comes back to just because that product is sitting on the shelf does not mean that it's safe, because you're not realizing everything that what happened behind the scenes to get that product to the shelf.
Yeah.
And I did read, too, something that the CEO of Syngenta was actually hired by the federal government at one point. I was kind of wondering, I don't know if you heard about that, but
Mm.
I was wondering if that had anything to do with it getting approved for use in the United States. But why don't you just go ahead and tell us, like, kind of a summary of what that experience was, and then what happened once you gave them the results.
Well, actually, you said something interesting in that we're not talking about drugs. Remember, we're talking about pesticides, and the governing body that regulates pesticides is the Environmental Protection Agency. And the Environmental Protection Agency didn't come into existence until 1972. So most, if not all, of the pesticides you see on the shelf were never approved and never went through testing. There was no governing body. I mean, I believe the USDA was challenged before 1972, but chemicals like ATRAZINE came on the market in 1958. So there was no testing and approval. So the EP,
Oh, wow, 1958.
1958, yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Chemicals like DDT and 2,4-D, these all came about in the 1940s. So there was no approval. They were used during wartime, and then they just were brought and used in agriculture. So there was no approval. So the EPA's job now is to find bad ones and get them off the market. So just because it's on the shelf doesn't mean that it went through any testing at all. It's retroactively going through testing after, how many years of being on the market and how many millions and millions of pounds per year.
Does the FDA actually test products themselves?
No, not pesticides are regulated by Environmental Protection Agency, not the FDA.
Oh, excuse me, the Environmental Protection Agency. Do they test?
No, the testing is up to the company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Fox Garden, the hen house, because the EPA's position. I've talked to people in the EPA about this, and I was told our position is the company that makes the money should pay for the testing, not the taxpayer. So it's up to the company, which sounds like a good idea, but then it's up to the company to show that their product is bad. So Novartis, they were Novartis back then, hired me to study whether or not atrazine was an endocrine disruptor. And at the time, they had a scientific advisory panel that was being run by a guy, I'll say his name, Ron Kendall. And at the exact same time, Ron Kendall was also sitting on the scientific advisory panel for the EPA. So he was working for the company and making money for the company and organizing experiments for the company while he was sitting on the US EPA board reviewing the same work. And he was also editing a major journal. So he was also controlling what got published in the field and what didn't get published. Same guy. Same guy. And when I found, the negative results, they weren't happy. They I'll just say it, they tried to get me to manipulate data in inappropriate ways. They tried to I'd signed a contract. They put a gag order. I couldn't talk to other scientists. I couldn't, go to conferences and talk about the work. I couldn't discuss it outside of our meetings with them. And they were controlling the funding as to whether or not I did the follow-up experiments and what I did. And essentially, I walked out of the contract. I used my own funding, and my students and I worked on our own to get the work done and to get the work published and out into the scientific literature and to be reviewed. And the company then hired other scientists to refute my work. And then they set out on a campaign to personally and professionally discredit me and try to ruin my career. And they argued that they didn't for a long time until they lost a court case recently. And New Yorker Magazine wrote about it. They had handwritten notes. They had many, many meetings where they wrote down, for example, under their scientific agenda, their first line in their own handwriting was, discredit Hayes. And it went beyond the science. They had lists of things that they were going to do to me, like exploiting my father's health problems, like investigating my wife, investigating my students, purchasing my name on the internet and redirecting all searches to them. They had access. One guy announced he had access to my email and that they were reading my emails, and, they were following me around. They were, and one particular employee would follow me to certain meetings and threaten me with violence, with sexual violence against me and my wife and my daughter. And yeah, I've gotten strongly written letters from their lawyer, but he knows that it's true, and he knows that there is evidence and proof of it. So,
Gosh, I don't know how you could keep it together. I would just be like, I would think I would want to blow up at the person, but you were pretty smart. Actually, you kind of did some kind of like some little spy James Bond kind of moves as well, right? Because they hacked your email.
yeah.
Wow, God, that must have been just so creepy, and these people showing up at these conferences before you got your little system down, showing up at the conferences and threatening you at the conferences.
Well, I mean, the most difficult thing was it was stuff that I knew, but that until now I couldn't talk about because then I would just look crazy. I said, "Follow me around," and but they wrote it all down. They very carefully documented their plans to, even the follow me around. They very carefully wrote out a plan and documented that they were going to go everywhere I was, and they knew where I was at all times, and they were going to send out pamphlets. And I see now, even now, there's hundreds and hundreds of pages of these things. I was just looking at some of the notes the other day where they, what they document, where they were writing statements for people inside the EPA. So the statement that, Ann Lindsay of the EPA made the statement that I never gave the EPA my raw data. And I have all these notes and all these emails from the EPA thanking me for my raw data. I'm like, why would she say that? And then you look through Syngenta's notes, and they have notes like, did we give Ann Lindsay her statement yet? Is she ready to talk to the press? So they were actually directing what the EPA said. They were actually putting lies in the EPA's mouth as part of their campaign to discredit me. And they wrote it down. And then they brought it to a judge with a big stamp on it that says privileged and confidential. I'm like,
but good for you. Good for you. Well, I just think that is as hard as it was for you to have to go through that. I mean, I'd like to see something good come out of it, in that it's an eye opener for people that things are not just black and white and cut and dry here. And we're talking big money.
yeah.
Like, how much money do these people make off these pesticides? It's like even billions of dollars, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, this is their number one selling product for what was the largest chemical company in the world.